It ended up happening. Like I prepared myself for disappointment to not hurt myself anymore. But it happened. LaMelo Ball snubbed from the All-Star team altogether, despite leading all guards in the Eastern Conference among fan votes. He's not an All-Star starter. He's not an All-Star, period. We talk about the snubbing, and then we'll rummage through the sicko satchel. Got some Terry Rozier stuff to get to as well. All today. Yeah. Locked on Hornets. It's a doozy.
You don't even play here anymore.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, and that includes YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, okay. Doug is consoling LaMelo Bobblehead. You like that? LaMelo Bobblehead.
I do like that. How did we never do that when this actual bobblehead came out?
That's sure. Right. Yeah, there's LaMelo Bobblehead that Doug is consoling for having not made the All-Star game. We'll talk about that. Doug Branson, everyhornetsboxscore.com. You can also check him out, Locked On NBA. He's also writing the new Locked On Daily newsletter, the Locked On Hornets newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. You can sign up for free right now, lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Hornets newsletter. And I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me on WFNZ complain about LaMelo not making the All-Star game. You can basically every day, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. I'll be on it this Super Bowl. New customers can bet just $5. If you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. So it happened, Doug. All-Star votes come in. We know that LaMelo was leading the fan vote category among Eastern Conference guards the entire way through. From wire to wire, LaMelo was number one among all those players in terms of fan votes. Then we had to figure out how he was going to finish among media votes and how he was going to finish among player votes. So the player was the most interesting thing because the media, they told us, right, through their podcast, through different channels, through their complaining, through saying that they don't watch the Hornets. We knew where he was going to finish among media votes, and it was dead last among anybody who received a vote at all, right? So it was LaMelo 7th, and then everybody else in the Eastern Conference tied for 0 because LaMelo got 3 total votes. He finished 7 among all those players. The players actually showed up for Melo. We said they kind of got it right. They voted him as the 3rd best player in the Eastern Conference among guards. So fans, they showed up. Players, they showed up. Media did not. Now the last hope for LaMelo to get to the All-Star game was for the coaches to pick LaMelo as a reserve. It did not happen. So head coaches, sometimes they will take this duty on themselves. Sometimes head coaches for NBA teams will pass on this responsibility to assistant coaches to pick the All-Star reserves, and then they'll carry out that responsibility. Whether it's assistant coaches, whether it's head coaches, they did not pick LaMelo Ball. He's a first alternate, but he is not in the All-Star game after the initial results are in. Doug, your thoughts?
My thought is that this is not entirely unexpected. It doesn't matter if it's a head coach or an assistant coach. These guys are obsessed daily with winning, and a lot of them are going to be more old school than new school, so it's no surprise to me that they were not going to select LaMelo on a 12-win team over Damian Lillard on a Bucks team that is competing in the Eastern Conference, or Tyler Hero, because that's really like, to me, the 2 guards, Darius Garland and Cade Cunningham, those were like obvious. Like Cade's working his way towards MVP. Darius Garland is arguably the best player on the best team in the Eastern Conference. So those are gimmies. So it really comes down to the wild card slots. And, you know, Dame Lillard has a track record. I mean, obviously this is his like 9th All-Star selection. And then Tyler Hero, that's really where, and Trae Young. I mean, the funny thing is like in all the discussions that I've heard today, no one's talking about LaMelo getting snubbed. They're all talking about whether Trae Young got snubbed or not. The LaMelo is an afterthought, and it's because he's on a team. Yeah. It's because he's on a team that's an afterthought. The Hawks are not an afterthought. Now they will be because they lost Jalen Johnson, but up to this point, the Hawks have not been an afterthought. They've been able to beat some good teams. So to me, my thought on this is, if you're LaMelo and you care about this at all, then I hope it fuels you to continue to compete, to continue to raise the level of your game. But further, I hope it inspires you to knock on the door of Jeff Peterson and say, hey, can we hurry this thing up? Okay, I know second inning of a 9-inning ball game. I know sustainability.
So times, yeah.
I know all these things that you keep talking about. But if I would like to get to an all-star game again, I would like to get multiple all-stars. I would like to be a perennial all-star. If he has that desire in his heart at all, I'd be knocking on JP's door and say, hey, time's a ticking. Let's go.
So the Eastern Conference reserves, Jaylen Brown, Cade Cunningham, Darius Garland, Tyler Hero, Damian Lillard, Evan Mobley, Pascal Siakam. There are a few names that you could quibble with here. Jaylen Brown seems like a reputation pick. Jaylen Brown has actually not been an all-star this year, in my opinion. Jaylen Brown, as you would say, Jaylen Clown back a couple of years ago before the championship. You might say it again this year. But Jaylen's taken a step back. Whether you listen to pod, I know Bill Simmons, right, loves the Boston Celtics. He's talked about it. You look at the numbers. He's putting up numbers actually comparable to his rookie season, more so than the other seasons that he's played where he's been All-NBA or that he's been an All-Star. Trae Young, the efficiency is towards where LaMelo Ball is. He's got 1 million assists, but also he's played more games. He has better talent. Even still, Trae would finish with more assists. Here's my thing. Just I'm going to try to make this as brief as possible. But so, Doug, I put a list of guys together that we had as the top players coming into the season before we saw one preseason game, before we saw one regular season game. Just the guys that we thought were going to be 1 through 10, essentially, the players that were going to suit up for this team that were most valuable, okay? So in somewhat order, but some you could quibble with, but I'm not here to debate that today. LaMelo, Brandon, Miles, Mark Williams, Trey Mann, Grant Williams, Josh Green, Nick Richards, Vasa, Tijon, Nick Smith Jr., whatever. That's not the debate today. But those are 9, 10 guys, right, that we just went through the list. You want to know how many games those guys have played? Miles Bridges played 30. Brandon Miller played 27. Mark Williams has played 20. Grant Williams played 16. Trey Mann has played 13. Trey Mann's played less games than Grant Williams, which was actually, I know he's been out for a while, but that was surprising. The Hornets altogether have played 44 games so far this year. They've played 44. And you've got guys like Miles Bridges playing 30 total. The guys that have played the most amount of games for this team, it's Josh Green, who was the highest up on the list at like 7. He played 41. Cody Martin played 39. Seth Curry's played 37. Musa Diabate, 37. Tijon Salon in the G League right now played 34. Doug, those players that I just listed, those are your top 5 guys in games played this year. Those are your top 5 guys. Musa, Tijon, Seth Curry. Those are your guys. Look, man, I have not done the research and gone all the way down with all these other teams, but I also don't need to. No other player, no other star, no other top franchise guy has had to deal with that. Look, you could say the Hornets have lost a bajillion games. That's why LaMelo isn't considered. Yeah, fair.
That's what everybody said.
Fine.
That's what everybody that doesn't listen to this podcast and dig into the numbers. That's what they said.
Yep, that's right. Here's a number for you. The Hornets have a record of 11-20. LaMelo Ball this season. They are 1-12 without him. I mean, 10-win increase for a player. I would really like to know, with their rosters that they have, how many other guys are plus 10 guys. Like, and it's not, well, we got to consider who was healthy at the right time as LaMelo. Man, miss me with all of that. Miss me with all of that, because you're talking about LaMelo not even getting into a rhythm again when he's in and out of the lineup. So it doesn't matter. Like, that's my thing. Look, it would be ridiculous to say that LaMelo is clearly better than everybody else and that he's the number 1 Eastern Conference guard. Like, there's a case to be made for Jalen Brunson. I'm not trying to be ridiculous. There's a case to be made for Donovan Mitchell. I would have those guys as the all-star starters too if it was a perfect world. I would have LaMelo number 3. I do think the players got it right. Cade Cunningham probably passed that as well with the way that he's playing. It's just when you hear a Rick Bucher say, there's no way in my world. Like, oh my God, no, not in my world. LaMelo is an all-star. Oh my God, that's gross. What are you doing? Not in my world. And then you have Howard Beck, who's like, he's a 10th. He's the 10th best guard in the Eastern Conference. These are minds in the NBA that people respect, and they're acting like he doesn't deserve a shot at an Eastern Conference reserve spot. It's not making the All-Star team altogether, Doug, because the Hornets are losing, and that's my biggest issue. It's okay. You want to say that these other guys have had really good years? Cool. But why are we acting like LaMelo is so far beneath everyone else? That is my issue, and that's why I think LaMelo's not an All-Star today, is because they treat him like he's not even in this class.
So I agree with everything that you're saying, and Trae Young has gone through a lot of this as well. But those are the rules of the game. Now you know the rules of the game, LaMelo. So if you want to make an All-Star game,
Hornets, yeah,
or Hornets, you know the rules of the game now. Go and demand better talent around you, like all the other NBA stars do. If you really think you're an NBA star, then act like an NBA star and say, hey, you're paying me a lot of money. I'd like to make All-Stars. I'd like to make playoffs. I'd like to get into the postseason and show people what I can and can't do and get these media off my back. Then that's how you do it. And because, look, what this told us is the fan vote doesn't matter. You can go and vote for LaMelo Ball all you want to next year. Doesn't matter. And the player vote doesn't really matter. I mean, they voted him third overall.
Yeah.
So none of that matters. What matters is winning. That is what has been told to us now. So if I'm LaMelo, if LaMelo Ball doesn't do that, if he doesn't demand more talent next season, and he misses the All-Star game next season, guess whose fault it is? It's not going to be the fans' fault. It's not going to be media's fault. If they don't win next season, I'm putting it squarely on Jeff Peterson and LaMelo Ball.
Yeah, people are acting like this is Zaza Pachulia. Like, get out of my face, man.
No, this was not a troll vote.
Yeah,
he had the numbers.
Yeah, I know. It's
got to get the wins.
Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Wins, baby.
He's everywhere.
Okay. Now we go to the Terry Rozier stuff, which we just can't live here in the Queen City. We'll get to it. Terry Rozier coming up next. LOH. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying, all of that, if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. More Locked On Hornets ahead. So we were on live Wes and Walker yesterday, and we see the Terry Rozier news come in, and we just kind of, throw our hands up and say, great, here's another Hornets-centric thing we have to talk about without actually talking about the game. So Wall Street Journal, they release an article yesterday saying that Terry Rozier might be, I don't want to fumble over this, Doug. I don't know if you have the write-up in front of you.
I got it.
So go ahead.
Yeah. Wall Street Journal reporting federal prosecutors have been investigating whether veteran NBA player Terry Rozier manipulated his performance as part of an illegal sports betting scheme. The inquiry into Rozier is part of a wider government probe into a sprawling ring of gamblers and poker players who have allegedly rigged games across the sports landscape. People familiar with the matter said. The same investigation has already led to a criminal charge and a lifetime ban from the NBA for former Toronto Raptors forward Jonte Porter. In March, this is a quote from Mike Bass, NBA spokesman, and said in March 2023, the NBA was alerted to unusual betting activity related to Terry Rozier's performance in a game between the Charlotte Hornets and New Orleans Pelicans. The league conducted an investigation and did not find a violation of rules, unquote. The game in question took place on March 23rd, 2023, when Rozier was a member of the Hornets. The betting on Rozier was strange enough that day to raise alarms at U.S. Integrity, a firm that works with sports entities to monitor markets for suspicious activity. In that game, Rozier played just over 9 minutes before being substituted out during a timeout. He left with a foot injury that I think was listed as like foot discomfort. and did not return, Rozier would miss the remaining 8 games for the struggling Hornets. Oh man, Wall Street Journal has to take the shot at the Hornets. Even the Wall Street Journal. They finish here. Who at the time were owned by Michael
to the
Jordan.
money line. Yeah, there you go. That's the money line, right?
Who at the time were owned by Michael Jordan.
You bring this piece to your editor, and the editor's like, you put MJ in there. Put MJ in there before you send that out.
It's a betting story,
Thank
and
you.
the team was owned by MJ. You put that in there.
Yeah, put Michael Jordan in there. Well, yeah, a lot of what we can do right now is just quote what's in some of these articles. But you're right, Doug. I know you came across something from that episode we did after that game against the Pelicans, where, by the way, it wasn't just Terry Rozier that left this game. I don't know if you got that as well. Remember, it was Dennis Smith Jr. who would also leave that game. And, there was another player, but there were 2 players that wouldn't come back at all the rest of the season. I believe Terry was one of them. I believe Dennis Smith Jr. did come back and play. Kelly Oubre, I believe also, if I'm not mistaken, left that game too. So you had a bunch of these injuries that happened in this contest against New Orleans, and this is the game that is being investigated. It seems like the NBA has already done this to some degree, that they've already looked into it, but they're still cooperating with the investigation with another party coming in now to look at this. Doug, I know you went through our episode after that, though. What did you find from some of your takes on the matter?
Well, I found my luscious long locks that I was rocking
baby.
there. I miss those. I'm good with what I've got right now, but I do miss those halcyon days. What I don't miss, it's funny to say, like, I don't miss how much of a mash unit the Hornets were, because they still are. But yeah, they were missing a lot of players at the time, and then sustained multiple injuries there as they limped along to finish that 22-23 season. And I remarked in that episode that I thought to myself, like, he must have had a foot injury that he was nursing for a few games that then just became too uncomfortable to play, because I said it's odd that a player enters the game fully healthy. He was not on the injury report at all, and then left the game with foot discomfort. And watching the game and watching his few minutes in the game, there was no moment in which I went, oh, he's like, that looked like he kind of stepped on a foot or landed weird and like limped off the floor. No, it was just like 1 second he was there and healthy, and the next second he was gone. Here's what will be interesting as this moves on. Was it a scenario of Terry Rozier communicating with people within the betting community and saying, I'm going to take myself out of this game, bet the under? That's what happened with Jonte Porter. That's why he got the ban, because he was communicating with people saying, I'm going to do this injury, so take all my unders.
Yeah.
Or was it a situation where the Hornets as an organization maybe he was dealing with a lingering foot injury, and the Hornets as an organization said, hey, if this feels uncomfortable at all, we'll go ahead and take you out and we'll shut you down, because we're shutting the season down in general. And somebody had gotten insider information, whether it be from Rozier or a team of, someone within the team, they'd gotten that info, and that's what happened. And then that wouldn't be so much on Rozier as somebody getting the info. It does speak to the weirdness of how these seasons end and the connection to betting, and how teams they're not really losing on purpose, but they're kind of losing on purpose, and people are betting on that. And, it's all weird.
Well, the other thing I wanted to mention too, Tim Reynolds of the Associated Press tweeted out when this was all coming out that the Wall Street Journal reports that Terry Rozier's performance in a March 23rd, 2023 game with Charlotte is being probed by federal investigators.
Right.
Rozier has not been accused of wrongdoing, we can confirm.
Correct.
So if Rozier has not been accused of any wrongdoing, then that would lend itself to the latter in which you bring up. And it feels
he's being investigated. So he hasn't been accused. He hasn't been charged with anything, but that is being investigated, and he is being investigated as part of that probe.
It feels like I was talking about this with Colin Hoggard at WFNZ too. Is there a little bit of a burying of the lead here? Because the lead might be that there's a gambling ring that is rampant within the world of sports that Terry Rozier might or might not be a part of. But the gambling ring that might be affecting the outcome of these games is something possibly to look into.
Well, when the Jonte Porter thing hit, that was the thing that was being somewhat whispered or said out of the side of one's mouth, was that, like, Is it really just like Jonte Porter and that's it? Or is this a wider thing? Will there be more names? And again, just careful here, like Rozier has not been charged with anything, but it would not surprise me if another player in the NBA or in any of these sports is caught up in this investigation, which is wide-ranging. And the wider conversation that I don't know that we're prepared to have on this particular episode is like, this stuff strikes at the heart of, am I watching something that's on the level? Am I betting on something? Am I spending my money, betting on something that's on the level? Because that's important too. Like, you don't want fraud. It's one thing to debate the merits of betting and sports and them being in bed with one another, but it's another thing to say, well, okay, but it's fraudulent. So all of that is going to get sort of sussed out in this. I just want to comment for the Hornets fans' perspective on this. It's like, can the Hornets just go one season without weird player association? Like, Rozier doesn't even play here anymore, and yet we're still getting these headlines where Hornets. If the Hornets had at any point won those play-in games and like won playoff series and surprised and done anything good, we'd get a 30 for 30 on this team because there are so many little incidents that have happened around this team. It's mind-blowing. And one last thing. If Rozier is implicated in this whole thing, and he did fake the foot injury, I just really want to then shine the light on him going to Miami and accusing the Hornets of having a losing culture. Because then it's like, whoa, man, hypocrisy. Again, this is all, he hasn't been accused of a crime, this is all alleged. But if it does happen, I'm going to go back and sound the hypocrisy alarm. Well, because the only person that in that instance, in that idea, the only person that would have a culture of losing would be the guy that faked a foot injury to get out of a game.
Well, plus what hurts too is Terry was our hero for a while. Terry was our guy for 2 years. LaMelo is supposed to be that. He is, except that when he's hurt, Terry Rozier is the one that's hitting all these shots.
I'm comforting LaMelo again. LaMelo.
Console LaMelo bobblehead. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
We rummage through the sicko satchel once more. We look on to some more fun topics here. Last segment of LOH.
Crimes everywhere.
This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook, baby. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get on the action. It's super easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. And the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5. If you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets too. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. More Locked On Hornets ahead. I did want to say one other thing about the gambling stuff with Terry Rozier specifically, and as it pertains to leagues. Conspiracy theories, oftentimes they will go so far into the league rigging the product, whether it's the NFL, the officiating towards the Kansas City Chiefs because they want Pat Mahomes in the Super Bowl, the NBA because they want their big market teams. We know about the conspiracy theories of the leagues actually controlling the product that you see. I always go the opposite way on that. I think that people miss the mark. One, it's a conspiracy theory for a reason, but I think these leagues have shown you that they are going so far to make sure that this is a 100% sanitized product from a we are not controlling this standpoint because they want you to feel comfortable enough to part with your money. They do not want your money to stay in your pocket. They want you to feel comfortable enough to part ways with it, knowing that anything could happen, including an upset that you might have bet on for a big payout. It's why a team or a league like the NFL won't allow you to use team facilities to bet on water polo. And if you bet on a different sport entirely using their team facilities, you're going to get a 6-game suspension. If you get a 6-game suspension, you're going to lose a lot of money because you decided to bet on whatever it is on their team facility. If you bet on the league, now you're out for the season. Like, we're just not going to have that. And that is completely understandable. But these leagues do not want you. They do not want the perception that there's any funny business going on, because they want to be so sanitized that you feel comfortable parting with your money. So it's not like the NBA is out here running this stuff. It's not like the NFL is out here running this stuff, even if they are in bed with gambling companies at this point. So this is where, even if that's true, the fact that it is legal in other states now, and that North Carolina being one of them, commercials running rampant, hey, we understand that game as well as anybody. It does widen the range of people that are going to be a part of this, and it does get harder to control when you talk about more people being involved in this world, and that's what we're seeing with some of this stuff.
Yeah, and for Rozier, it's unfortunate if he is completely innocent, because now he's going to have this suspicion, like anytime he gets injured in a game or has to sit out, there's going to be this, as he is with a team that could potentially make the postseason, and Miami, who's going to continue to play him through this investigation. Unfortunately, he's going to have to deal with that skepticism probably for the rest of his career.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's have some fun. Thank you, Suman, for writing a fun Friday question in the Sicko Satchel. Doug, hit us with the question.
What are your best 3 and worst 3 non-draft player acquisitions in Hornets history? Here are Shuman's picks. For best, he goes Big Al, Jeremy Lin, and third, maybe Dwight Howard. Worst, Lance Stevenson, Gordon Hayward, and then Ben Gordon third. A lot of room for discussion for this one. Let's swarm Charlotte. So real quick, Walker, before we dive in, I think Shuman is asking for our best 3 and worst 3 Bobcats forward, because I didn't see anything in the pre-03 list. So I'm just going to assume
history, like specifically Hornets history, right?
Yeah, separating Hornets from the pre-03. So I just really quickly wanted to run down my pre-03 list as the preeminent Hornets historian here on the show on every Hornets box score. I think if we're talking pre-03, none of those 3 names, Big Al, Lynn, or Dwight, would make my list. It would be Mashburn, Mason, Rice in some order. And then worst pre-03 would be Derek Coleman. This was tough for me to find, and this is a testament to Bob Bass, who worked his bass off. Derek Coleman, definitely. Bringing Kendall Gill back, because they drafted Kendall Gill, and then he went away, and they brought him back from the Supersonics, and he really didn't play very well. So bringing Kendall Gill back, and then I'll add this one, Ray Wooldridge.
Oh my God!
Maybe that name doesn't ring a bell. Maybe you're a more recent fan and you don't understand what that means. Ray Woolridge was an Atlanta businessman who somehow wormed his way into George Shinn, then owner of the Charlotte Hornets, wormed his way into his business affairs and somehow got control of nearly 50% of the team, with the express intention from the moment that he bought into the Charlotte Hornets in 1999. He had the intention of moving the team to New Orleans, which he was successful in doing. Ray Woolridge, George Shinn is like the bad guy in Charlotte Hornets history, but there's sort of George Shinn is Darth Vader and Woolridge was the Emperor. It's like we all thought Vader was the bad guy, but really the guy behind the guy, Ray Woolridge, was Emperor Palpatine.
Oh, and you got plenty of bad figures there too. Spencer Stolpen also in that Hornets minority order. Yeah, there's a lot of you get
just a lot of bleep. There's a whole
my God.
Whatever you think about Michael Jordan, is some of it's fair, some of it's unfair, but man, I mean the team then was run again 99 on. Very short amount of time there, just a couple of seasons, but just a bunch of bleep holes.
Yeah, Spencer Stolpen pled guilty to bank fraud, by the way, just to give everybody. Okay, anyways.
This is a show full of fraud. This is the fraud show.
The Locked On Hornets Fraudcast. Thank you for making us your first listen. So you look at the top picks in Hornets history. So if we go with best, right? Has to be Big Al. I think actually it's pretty clear that that's the most impactful non-draft acquisition they've ever had. The dude made an all-NBA team. It's only him and Kemba Walker to have ever done that in Hornets history. So Big Al is number one. This is where it gets tough. Jeremy Lin, that was really important. Names to just spitball. Courtney Lee, huge addition to that squad mid-season. that allowed them to go on a run in the second half. Remember, we came across this during some Hornets history episodes. PJ Hairston started like 40 games that season for a playoff squad, and then they switched, and then Courtney Lee comes over, starts, and now they're a playoff team and competing with the Miami Heat. So Courtney Lee, in terms of just a player that added a ton of value for that squad, including giving us our single best moment as far as a play in a competitive basketball game, hitting the three against Miami. Courtney Lee is another name that I would bring up here as well. I don't know who would come second at the top of my head.
Stack Jack. You've got
yeah.
We're not going to count Gerald Wallace because while they didn't draft, they drafted him in the franchise expansion
draft stuff. Yeah.
So we're going to count that as draft.
Yeah.
But you could say Stack Jack, Jay Rich. I don't think Jay Rich didn't win any playoff games. I don't know that anyone won any playoff games with the Bobcats, right? Oh yeah, they won. They won a couple.
No, they didn't. No, they got swept both times. They made it 2 times. They got swept both times.
I dreamt. See, I've created fantasies in my head of the Bobcats winning a single playoff game.
That's right.
Just to keep me going here. But yeah, you could throw Stack Jack in there for sure. I mean, definitely. I think way more impactful than. I mean, I'd probably put him second.
Yeah, I probably would. No, I'd put Stack Jack second for sure. I just wasn't thinking I was.
And Jay Rich again enlivened that team at least.
Yeah.
In a way. Worse, I mean, I'd throw again going back to the Bobcats. Corey Maggette. You throw Maggette in there.
Well, let me look at the top 35 Hornets of all time list, Doug. So to try to figure this out, that would help us quite a bit. Yeah, I don't think so. Al Jefferson is going to be first on this list, as we talked about. The second guy that actually played for the Bobcats / Hornets during this time, Steven Jackson, is number 2 on my list in this category. And then number three, I have Marvin Williams. I have Marvin Williams on this list, number 3. I think ambassador on the playoff team too, like the fact that he was on that squad, right? He was on that squad. They brought him back. So yeah, Marvin Williams is 3rd on my list. I actually think I agree with that. I think I agree with myself 2 years ago. I agree with myself. Okay.
I go Big Al, Stack Jack, and Lynn. That would be my list.
Okay. Worst ones. I think Suman nails it with Lance having to be number 1 on this list. There's no doubt about that.
Yes, because I think a lot of people would say put Gordon Hayward over Lance because you paid so much money for Gordon Hayward and got such low production, whereas Lance, at least, it wasn't a mammoth contract because you were betting a little bit moderately in that free agency pickup. But and honestly, Gordon a little bit born out of the Lance Stevenson failure, but the Lance failure had so many dominoes. It's that meme where the guy starts to hit the small domino and it becomes the big domino. Like you can connect it all the way to Dwight Howard. It was so many missteps that happened as a result of trying to recover from the Lance Stevenson disaster that I think you have to put Lance 1.
Yeah, I think you're right about Lance. I think Gordon 2 with the money. I think Suman probably has that right. And then Ben Gordon just for a good name to put in there as well. I don't know. But just an absolute nothing. So yeah, that would make sense.
I'll throw Miles Plumlee. The trade to acquire Miles Plumlee was the really, I think, representative of, these guys have no idea what they're doing. They had a playoff team, and instead of investing in that playoff team, they decided, it's not worth it to try to run it back. So we're just going to try to wiggle our way out of this and acquire Roy Hibbert and try to figure this thing out. And when that failed horribly, they pivoted to Miles Plumlee, who gave them, everyone knew was going to give them absolutely nothing. And somehow it's like, what's the thing? It's like, I had low expectations, but holy bleep, we managed to get below them.
Right.
And so the Miles Plumlee acquisition, if not just for his lack of performance, if for what it meant, which is that, to me, that was the final, okay, MJ is out. Once that failed, that MJ was like, all right, I'm done with this team. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, when the trade comes in, I remember I've told the story a couple times, but I was live on air, and that trade comes in, and the host at the time turns to me and says, Walker, help me out here. And I looked right back at him and said, I can't. I can't tell you. I can't tell you in any way that this makes sense, and that would ring true. All right, that'll do it for the Locked On Hornets broadcast. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast. That includes YouTube. Go listen to Doug Branson on Locked On NBA. Go read his stuff on everyhornetsboxscore.com. And then listen to me, Walker Mail, every weekday on WFNZ with Wes and Walker 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great weekend. We'll be back with you on Monday.